No? All right, let's get into it. So, I know y'all are just gonna like record this video and replay it back later, right? So, of course, let's talk about the Oval Office, which makes sense. Have y'all been watching the midday breaks, the White House task force on the coronavirus?
Yeah, they're terrible.
Right? The last one I watched was Thursday, and there was like some reporter that said that
Is that is that yeah, is that when he attacked Peter Alexander?
maybe, and he was like, he was like, yeah, thanks for letting us know that the economy is experiencing a recession, and I was just like, and
Well,
then
did you see the one where someone asked him a question and he answered with, "All I know is you're a terrible reporter"?
Yeah, that was Peter Alexander.
Really?
Peter Alexander asked Trump, "What do you say to the American people if they're feeling scared?" And he's like, "That's a terrible question. All I know is you're a terrible reporter, and you work for a terrible news organization."
He said, like, "I would say to them that you're a terrible reporter." That was it.
Wild times we live in, y'all. Wild times. Anyways, so let's talk about the constitutional basis of the presidency. That's defined in Article 2 of the Constitution. It begins by asserting that the executive power shall be vested in a president of the United States of America. And so there are two important elements for this whole clause. The first one being what the executive power is, and for the longest time it's been a matter of dispute. And then secondly, the power is vested in a president, and in doing so, it establishes a unitary nature of the office. And so, while the powers of the president in Article 2 are no match for the powers of Congress stated in Article 1, Section 8, the unitary nature of the office in the president is the presidency's greatest advantage. Likewise, the vagueness of executive power provides room for growth in the presidential power over time. And so, of course, we know that we, the people, actually don't pick the president. The Electoral College chooses the president, and of course, it's mad sketch, mad mysterious. Some people argue it's undemocratic, and ultimately, it was intended to provide a system of peer review for presidential selection. And so, there are some elements of this system of peer review have eroded over time, but the Electoral College remains in place. I don't think the Electoral College has come up for, well, not debate, but I can't recall if there was any presidential candidate that was talking about abolishing the Electoral College. Was there? I know Elizabeth Warren wanted to get rid of the filibuster, and a couple people wanted to do that. And Tom Steyer wanted to, what's it called it? He wanted to instill congressional limits, but I don't think there was anybody that wanted to get rid of the college. Was there? Do y'all know? Gonna look it up real quick. I don't think so. Maybe not. Could you imagine what would happen if that did? Anyways, so there are powers. What are the not there are powers? So these are some of the powers that the president has as described by Article 2. Expressed powers. There are specific expressed powers refer to the specific powers granted to the president under Article 2. Then delegated powers refer to constitutional powers that are assigned to one government agency but are then exercised by another agency with the express permission of the first agency. And then finally, there are inherent powers, and these refer to powers claimed by a president that are not expressed but instead inferred from it. So examples of those delegated powers, all that we'll talk about in a couple of slides, but these are all the powers that Congress let the president have, let the president operate, let the president do. So let us see. Question 1. The president's power to propose a budget every year is which of the following? Is it an expressed power? Is it a delegated power? Or is it an inherent power? President's power to propose a budget.
Is it expressed?
I have one for expressed, and no, that's not right.
Darn.
B.
I hear one for B. What say the rest of you?
Yeah, B.
B.
We're all saying B. It is B. Congress delegated the power to the president to propose an executive budget according to the Budget and Accounting Act of 1921. However, C is an acceptable answer. It's not the correct answer, but it can be accepted because the power could be inferred from the president's power to give Congress information of the State of the Union and recommend their consideration of such measures as he shall judge necessary and expedient. So maybe
Will the midterm grades be posted on Blackboard?
today, I have to grade.
Okay.
I've been procrastinating a lot. My bad, y'all. No one's failing. No one's failing. You can't fail now because coronavirus. So, hooray. I mean, unless you know I haven't seen you since the first day of class. So let's talk about these expressed powers first and foremost. Military powers. Article 2 gives the president the title of commander-in-chief. Presidents have effectively used this power as the power to make war. Other expressed powers, judicial. The president can grant pardons as well as provide amnesty. And then finally, diplomatic. It can negotiate treaties as well as receive foreign ambassadors. As president, he or she is the country's #1 ambassador. They are our spokesperson. Other executive powers, not executive, expressed powers. Executive, the president shall take care that the laws be faithfully executed. And the president can also nominate executive and judicial officials. We all remember the hot mess of the Kavanaugh hearings. That was some of that executive power right there. There are also legislative powers. The president gives information to Congress as well as recommend measures. And then there's also the veto. I mean, I'm pretty sure you all have heard about the coronavirus stimulus package. Looking forward to it if it works out. That's $1,000. I don't know where I can go to spend it, but it's $1,000. So that's as a result of the legislative power. And of course, y'all let me know if I'm going too fast. So all this slide just shows the number of nominations to the federal courts that the previous presidents have done. So of course, Clinton, son Bush, and then Obama. Let's see. So Obama had the most circuit nominations, but he actually had the lowest success rate. But it's really nominal when you compare it to both Obama and Clinton, nominal at best. And their success rates, even if we look at the success rates, Obama still had a lower success rate. Why is that? It's for debate. Some people argue that largely some people just did not feel that some of the congressmen, in particular the Senate, did not feel that the types of people Obama was nominating to the federal court system were actually qualified to be there. If you want to learn more information about that, you should take a judicial class, because Dr. Mack does not study judges or court systems. But Esler does. Esler and Lauthan. But not really the nominations. Nominations are weird. That's a conversation for a different day. Anyways, let's get to that executive privilege. And so all executive privilege is just that the claim of confidential communications between the president and the president's closest advisors should not be revealed without the consent of the president. However, back in the U.S. versus Nixon case, like right when we were trying to figure out what the hell was going on with Watergate and all that stuff, the court recognized that the court recognized the validity of executive privilege. However, they argued it does not apply in the case of Nixon's White House tapes. And in fact, during the Obama administration, they also tried to claim executive privilege in trying to refuse to comply to a subpoena from the House of Representatives for documents related to Operation Fast and Furious. Like it wasn't a case to make Paul Walker a ambassador or anything like that. You want to know what the operation of Fast and Furious is? We have our Googles and stuff. I want to say executive privilege was also used or tried to be used during the short-lived impeachment trials for President Trump. Ultimately, the way the circumstances under which the executive privilege can be used or cannot be used ultimately depends on the seriousness of the accusation and seriousness of the charge. So let's talk about the veto process. So we know, thanks to Schoolhouse Rock, that a bill has to go through the House, be approved in the House, then has to go through the Senate and be approved by the Senate, and then it's sent to the president, and the president can either choose to flat out veto it or choose to keep it in his pocket, especially if it's towards the end of the congressional session, and then that turns into a pocket veto. Or if it's given to the president and congressional session is still going and he chooses not to sign it, it'll ultimately turn into law without him signing. So those are the three instances that can happen. But let's talk about what happens if the president says no, just says I veto it, or it turns into a pocket veto. So of course we know the bill passes Congress. That's what that top bubble is. Will it show here? Yes. Top bubble here. And then of course the bill is presented to the president. Then what happens is the president is just not going to look at it then and there. President has people. So it's reviewed by the assistant. It's reviewed by the Office of Management and Budget, as well as relevant department heads and other bureaucratic leaders, including the Justice Department. If no action is taken within 10 working days while Congress is in session, the bill becomes a law. Hip, hip, hooray. That's the end, as seen right here. However, if there is no action taken and then, of course, the congressional session ends, the bill dies. It's a pocket veto. The president puts it in his back pocket where it dies. The end. If the bill is deemed acceptable to the president, he or she will sign the bill, usually in a public ceremony in presence of key sponsors and supporters, and then pins become souvenirs. Did I really need that textbook? So I actually have a textbook for Black politics that actually shows Obama signing in the Affordable Health Care Act. It has, what's that little black boy? The kid president on it. It's like this huge ceremony. And of course, it's true. Like the president has like 12 pins and he like writes his name all. It's really just comical. And then if he passes out the pins and then you see them on eBay, some people are hawking them upwards about like $100. It's wild. One of these days I will get a signed pen. It'll be cool, but not right now. Anyways, but yay, the bill becomes a law. If a veto is recommended, so he doesn't flat out say, I will veto it, but I'm thinking about vetoing it, it's then given to staff assistants or relevant department heads, speech writers, etc., to get the process started. And then, of course, the bill is vetoed. And so what happens after it's vetoed? It's then sent back to Congress in order for it to be overridden. Of course, you need 2/3 congressional majority. And if the bill is overridden, if the veto is overridden, the bill lives and it becomes a law. If Congress can't get that 2/3 majority, it's a wrap. The bill dies, and now we have to start all over again. And so, of course, throughout our presidential time, will you let me show? Will you let me show? All right, you will. Great. How many vetoes have happened in our nation's founding? So how many have actually happened? Don't know what was going on during Grover Cleveland and Chester Arthur's presidencies, but there was a shit ton of vetoes happening. And that
Grover Cleveland's was right after the Civil War, so they were doing like rebuilding and stuff. So there was a lot of Civil War veterans that were trying to get laws passed for pensions, and he just kept vetoing it. I learned that when I did my veto gate thing.
Yeah, that's right. Thanks for bringing that back in, Henry. So that's right, because as we can see, the orange represents vetoes that happened during divided government. Now, interestingly enough, during FDR's reign, he also had a shit ton of vetoes, and it was actually during a unified government. And of course, we know the reason for that is because FDR was out here trying to change the world with all of his New Deal legislations, adding all these programs, bringing into question exactly what powers does a president have, what can he or she do to improve infrastructure, and in fact, even just redesign infrastructure as a whole. So let's talk about these delegated powers. And so, of course, Congress creates agencies by law, and these agencies use discretion in how they carry out their functions. The president is sometimes given authority directly and sometimes indirectly through the power to appoint agency officials. And so these inherent powers, what are some of these inherent powers? War powers. That's the president's power to make war. Not create war, but make war. Then there's also legislative initiative and the executive order. The legislative initiative refers to the president's power to bring a legislative agenda before Congress, the executive order refers to a rule or regulation issued by the president that has the effect of legislation. So anytime you hear about a president listing off or making a series of executive orders, this is what they're referring to. And then legislative initiative. What was the last legislative initiative? Not the coronavirus, because I think if Congress hadn't passed that, I wouldn't have been surprised if he would have done an executive order. Part of me is like, I think the most noteworthy one was the building the wall. And I want to say that was last year's congressional session's big initiative that he tried to bring up. But it is noteworthy in terms of war. America has only been in 5 wars. And the last war we've been in, the official war, the last war we were in was World War II. But what about the Korean War?
Not the Iraq War?
Nope, that's not a war. The last war we were in was World War II, an actual war. So the president can make war. Congress can declare war. And so it's not a war unless Congress declares war. And the last time Congress declared war was World War II. But the president can make wars. So yeah, he was at Sunbush. Yeah, he made the war in Iraq. But it's not a real war because Congress didn't say it was a war. Congress did not declare war. In the eyes of Congress, that was a military operation. Are you shocked and confused, y'all?
Nope.
I hear one, nope, not surprised at all. So let's talk about this legislative epoch. So between 1800 and 1933, this just refers to the time in which Congress actually has a little bit more power over the president in terms of what can be done in terms of expanding infrastructure, improving the lives of the people, as well as really defining exactly what the federal government can and cannot do. And so during this time, of course, we know presidential power has varied over time, especially amongst particular occupants of the presidential branch. But for most of our institutional history, it can be described as the time in which Congress dominated national policy making. And so just in thinking about this time between 1800 and 1933, who were some noteworthy presidents that you can think of? Presidents that's just changed the world.
Lincoln.
We got one for Lincoln. Who else?
FDR.
FDR. That's 2. Is that all the noteworthy presidents?
Yeah, if I can't think of any more.
So Lincoln freed the slaves. Actually, that's the wrong finger. Lincoln freed the slaves, and then FDR saved the economy. Wait, there's Andrew Jackson. He killed all the Native Americans. I don't know if that's noteworthy.
He's on a $20 bill.
Don't know for how much longer, though. Any day now, Harriet Tubman's going to come in through the clutch. So we have Jackson, who killed all the Native Americans, Lincoln, who freed the slaves, and FDR, who saved the economy.
Polk?
Who?
Polk?
Polk? What did he do?
Manifest Destiny.
Ah,
With that.
actually, I have not heard Polk I haven't heard Polk since AP US History for myself. Wow. Yeah, that's been 13 years. So thanks, Hannah.
Washington.
George Washington. Yeah, that was 1800, right? He was president during that time? Word? All right. He was the first one. That's noteworthy. Because 2 is not a winner and 3 nobody remembers. All right. So I guess these are our noteworthy presidents. Are there any others?
I mean, Thomas Jefferson was pretty noteworthy too.
What did he do?
The Louisiana Purchase.
Okay. Okay, he doubled the size of the nation. That's noteworthy. I'm surprised no one mentioned that president that died in the bathtub, or did he not die in the bathtub as the president?
No, he didn't die in a bathtub. He just got stuck.
You
I
know,
think they got him out.
that's not noteworthy at all then.
And
All
then
right.
I mean, you got Woodrow Wilson too, president during World War One.
He actually grew up in my hometown.
Oh.
And then he streamed Birth of a Nation in the White House, said it was lightning on film. He believed
Yeah, he's pretty racist.
Yeah, extremely
Not
racist.
great.
So I guess, you can also be noteworthy for your racism. If we can say Andrew Jackson is noteworthy for killing all the Native Americans. Well, not all of them, just 99% of them. Yeah. I guess these are noteworthy presidents. What about wasn't there like a president that like was only in office for like 3 weeks? I know that's not really noteworthy. I think he wasn't there long enough to even be sworn in. Sad. Oh well. So let's talk about that one president that changed the whole game, FDR. And so, of course, the New Deal introduced new interventions in economic life and regulation by the federal government that necessarily meant a larger role in governance for the chief executive. And since the New Deal, this larger role for the president has only expanded. So, what are some of the things that the president has done since FDR, or the president's office can do thanks to FDR? So, thanks to FDR, now we have this thing called the cabinet. We have this whole thing about the White House staff, as well as the executive office of the president. Running out of time? We removed the 40-minute time limit on your meeting. Love it. Oh, so thanks to Zoom, I can only go for 40 minutes. We'll keep this in mind from now on. Oh, well. Executive office of the president, and then, of course, yeah, the vice president exists. And what does the vice president do? It varies from president to president, what they can and can't do. So what does the cabinet do? Cabinet refers to the secretaries or chief administrators of the major departments of the government, and all these departments, of course, report to the president. White House staff refers to analysts and advisors who work directly for the president. The executive office of the president refers to permanent agencies that perform defined management tasks for the president. And then finally, we have our VP. And so while the rise of the institutional presidency has meant that the president has become more of a thing as opposed to a person over time, while most individuals who make up the cabinet, the White House staff, the executive office of the president, and the vice president can change from term to term or from administration to administration, it's important to note that these structures remain. And as a result, they've become institutionalized. So now we can actually think of the president as more so of a large organization as opposed to an individual when it was originally created by the framers and founders of the Constitution. And so all this slide shows is just exactly how does the institutional presidency look. And so you see we have our White House staff, we have our independent agencies and corporations, we have our cabinet, and we have the EOP. So you can see under the cabinet, Department of X, Y, and Z's, Justice, Defense, State, Education, Treasury, Labor, Veterans Affairs, Department of Transportation. Under the EOP, we have our Council of Economic Advisors, we have our Office of Administration, we have the Office of National Drug Control Policy, we have the White House office, we have the Office of U.S. Trade. Under independent agencies and government corporations, we have the CIA, we have the General Services Administration, the EPA, and then of course under the White House staff, you have your Chief of Staff, your Press Secretary, your Special Assistants, and your Senior Advisors. The whole squad, well, not the whole squad, but just about everybody that's up there with the president during those coronavirus news breaks represent some form, not some form. There are some people from his cabinet up there. There are some people from the EOP, and a large portion of them are White House staff. Why do I have this one? Oh, yeah. So, of course, which president of our most recent presidents was the most effective? So, of course, I have JFK through Obama. Who do you think was the most effective president? I have a special place in my heart for Jimmy Carter.
A lot of people at my convention as well.
See, Jimmy is a national treasure. Now, of course, I believe Jimmy is the most effective because he's from Georgia. And, he did a lot of his work post-presidency, which means, realistically, he was probably the least effective president. He and Gerald Ford.
Pretty much the only thing Gerald Ford did was pardon Nixon. And then that was pretty much it. Kennedy saved the world, though, which is pretty cool.
Because of the Cuban Missile Crisis?
Yeah. Other than that, he's okay, but he did do that, which is
he had Marilyn Monroe
not many other presidents have done.
He had Marilyn Monroe come out of a cake and sing happy birthday to him. No other president can say that happened.
Is that, I don't know if that makes you an effective president, though.
Times were different then.
I would argue for me, I think LBJ is the most effective president. But that's because, all of the civil rights legislation that JFK couldn't do because, he was shot in the head. LBJ saw that through fruition. In fact, he was like making backroom deals with senators from various states. In fact, that's how Alabama has a launch pad. He asked the Alabama legislators, what would it take for you to support civil rights legislation? And they said, we want a rocket launch pad from NASA. And that's how they got one in Alabama. He made it happen. It's like, if that's not boss, I don't know what is. No one thinks Reagan was the most effective? Reaganomics? Trickle-down economy? Bill Clinton was the first Black president. He was able to get away with a whole affair in office. No one considers that to be effective. Also, he oversaw the largest economic expansion in U.S. history, allegedly.
Isn't Clinton's presidency the last time we weren't in debt nationally?
Yeah. So we have one for Clinton. Or that was just a question, a clarifying question.
Yeah, it was more of just a clarifying question. I still like Kennedy saving the world. That was pretty cool.
Without JFK, Clinton wouldn't have anything to oversee. Okay.
I don't know if he was the most effective, but I think Obama getting us out of the recession.
He did do that whole healthcare thing. I don't know how effective that was, but that was essentially his presidency. Well, I think this is probably a good place to stop for now. And if we do this again on Wednesday, yeah, I'll do this again on Wednesday. Now that I know it'll be Zoom, we'll pick back up here on Wednesday.
Did you get a
huh?
Did you get a copyright strike on your YouTube channel?
I don't know. Does that mean they took down my channel?
I think they might have suspended your live streaming privileges.
I will check that after I stop this. And if that is in fact the case, then that means what I'll probably do is send an email right before all this starts. And then just because they suspend my streaming privileges doesn't mean I can't upload videos. Does it?
It depends. I don't think it would, but it depends.
Well, if they do, they do. We'll figure it out.
I think they might, because sometimes when they ban stuff, it bans you from recording and like posting too.
Yeah, for like a temporary restriction. But you should have got an email from you.